The alien queen was known across many star systems as a strong and fearless leader. For years she had guided her people with wisdom, fairness, and courage. Under her rule, her empire had grown powerful, and her name was spoken with respect by both allies and rivals. She had faced wars, natural disasters, and political conflicts, but never once had she shown weakness. Her people believed she was almost untouchable, someone who could not be harmed by illness or fatigue. That was why the moment of her sudden collapse shocked the entire court. It happened during an important council gathering inside the grand chamber of her palace. The chamber was filled with representatives from across the empire. Advisors, generals, and nobles had gathered to hear the queen's decisions on trade routes and new defense strategies. She stood at the center, tall and graceful, her presence commanding silence from all. But in the middle of her speech, her voice faltered. She gripped the edge of her throne as her hands trembled. A second later, she fell, her body shaking with weakness. Gasps filled the chamber. Guards rushed forward. The queen, the figure everyone thought unshakable, lay on the ground. Her physicians were called immediately. They scanned her body with advanced machines, checked her vital signs, and whispered to one another in worried tones. Their faces, usually calm and confident, turned pale. None of them could give a clear answer. The queen was alive, but her strength was slipping away. Something inside her was failing, yet no one could explain what it was. The court fell into panic. Advisors argued among themselves, blaming one another for not protecting her better. Some accused rival planets of poisoning her. Others whispered that it was the humans, the newest species to enter the galaxy, who had brought a strange disease. The queen had recently met with human leaders, and some aliens thought it was too much of a coincidence. Fear and suspicion grew. Every moment of confusion made her people more restless. Meanwhile, the queen's condition worsened. She could no longer stand without help. Her voice, once firm and powerful, had grown faint. At night, the palace halls echoed with the sounds of hurried footsteps, doctors rushing from one room to another, advisors whispering of the empire's future. Without her, who would lead? She had no chosen successor, and the thought of losing her filled her people with dread. The queen had always been their anchor. If she was gone, the empire might fall into chaos. Despite the growing fear, the queen herself remained calm. Even as weakness spread through her body, she tried to comfort those around her. She told her closest advisors not to lose hope, though her words grew softer with each passing day. But inside she knew the truth. Something serious was happening to her, and even with all the advanced technology her people possessed, no one could explain it. Doctors worked tirelessly, using medicines, energy fields, and even ancient healing rituals. Nothing changed. The queen's illness refused to be understood. Some days she would show a flicker of improvement only to collapse again the next. Her people gathered outside the palace gates, praying for her recovery. Across the empire, news spread quickly, and entire worlds held vigils waiting for updates. The thought of their queen being sick made many feel lost, as if the stars themselves were dimming. Among her council, the pressure grew heavier. Some believed it was best to begin choosing a successor, fearing the worst, but others resisted. They knew the queen was not only their ruler, but also a symbol of unity. To give up on her so soon would be to surrender to despair. Still, doubts lingered. The uncertainty hung over them like a dark shadow. As days passed, rumors spread further. Whispers filled the streets that perhaps the illness was a curse, a punishment for her empire's past conquests. Others said it was a natural consequence of her long years of service, as if even the strongest ruler could not fight against time, and always in hushed voices the humans were mentioned. Few aliens truly understood human biology, and the queen's contact with them made many uneasy. Could it be that their presence had unknowingly brought harm to her? In the palace, her loyal guards stood watch outside her chambers, their eyes filled with worry. Servants moved quietly, afraid to make noise that might disturb her fragile rest. Every time the doctors entered her room, the court waited anxiously for news, only to be met with silence or vague answers. The situation felt hopeless, And yet the queen's spirit was not completely broken. Though her body was weak, her mind remained sharp. She listened carefully to everything her advisors reported, even as she lay resting. She knew her empire could not fall apart simply because of her illness. She trusted her people to remain strong, but she also sensed their fear. In her quiet moments, she thought about the humans. Unlike her advisors, she did not believe they were the cause of her suffering. Something inside her told her the answer was different, something overlooked. But she had no strength to say more. The moment of her collapse had changed everything. The queen, once seen as untouchable, was now fragile. Her illness became the center of every conversation, every decision. The empire was holding its breath, waiting for a miracle that had not yet come. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone felt the same truth. If their queen could not be healed, their future would never be the same again. The days after the queen's collapse were filled with endless attempts to find a cure. Her physicians, the most skilled in the empire, brought every machine and tool at their disposal. They placed her under scanning lights, checked every cell of her body, and ran countless tests. Holographic screens lit up her chambers day and night, showing shifting lines and symbols that no one but the doctors could understand. Yet with all their knowledge, the answers never came. One doctor suggested it might be a rare infection from a distant planet. Another argued it was not an illness at all, but some hidden weakness in her genetics. They tried special injections that were supposed to strengthen her blood. They placed her in chambers filled with healing gases that could cure wounds and ease pain. They even used energy fields designed to repair damaged cells. Nothing worked. The queen grew weaker, and frustration filled the palace like a storm cloud. Her council began to lose patience. The generals whispered that if she could not recover, they must prepare for her death. Nobles feared that rival empires would sense her weakness and attack. Some began secretly meeting in corners of the palace, planning who might take her place if she could no longer lead. Yet no one dared speak such thoughts in front of her people, for they still gathered outside the palace walls, hoping to hear that their queen was safe. Among the ordinary citizens, rumors spread faster than the speed of ships. Some said her sickness came from an enemy's poison, hidden so well that even advanced machines could not detect it. Others believed it was a sign from the stars that the queen had been chosen for some higher purpose and would leave them soon. Fear and sadness mixed in the streets, and though her people tried to stay strong, their faith was slowly breaking. Inside the palace, tension grew between the advisors and the doctors. The advisors demanded answers, but the doctors could only bow their heads. One brave physician admitted that their knowledge had reached its limits. The queen's condition was unlike anything they had studied. Her body was reacting in ways their science could not explain. The council chamber filled with angry voices. Some accused the doctors of incompetence, while others said it was pointless to blame them when the illness was beyond understanding. As the arguments rose, the queen herself remained quiet. She listened but did not interfere. Speaking drained too much of her strength. Still, in her weak voice, she sometimes reminded them to stay united, not to let fear divide them. Even sick, she thought more about her people than herself. Her words silenced the council for a moment, but as soon as she rested, the debates began again. One idea came up repeatedly: isolation. Some advisors argued that her illness might spread, though no one else had shown symptoms. They feared it could be contagious. They suggested locking her away in a secure chamber where no one could enter without protection. But the thought of shutting their queen away like a prisoner filled others with anger. She was their leader, not a danger to avoid. The discussion nearly tore the council apart, yet no decision was made. Time moved painfully slow. Every sunrise brought more uncertainty. The queen's strength faded further. She could barely lift her hand, and her once bright eyes often closed, in exhaustion. Her loyal guards stood outside her door, their faces showing pain, though they said nothing. Servants moved silently, as if any sound might disturb her fragile rest. The palace, once filled with life and energy, felt like a place of mourning. The Empire's ambassadors who traveled between worlds began receiving strange messages. Rival empires were asking cautious questions about the Queen's health. Some offered false concern, but everyone knew they were only testing for weakness. If the truth spread, that the Queen might die, her enemies would prepare to strike. The Council understood this, and so they tried to keep her condition a secret. But secrets are heavy things, and with each passing day, more people learned the truth. Finally, in a moment of desperation, one advisor raised a suggestion that silenced the chamber. "If our own knowledge fails," he said, "perhaps we should seek help from others." At first, many thought he meant other alien species allies who might share their medical wisdom. But when he continued, his meaning became clear. What if we ask the humans? The chamber erupted in disbelief. The word human was spoken with both suspicion and doubt. Humans were new to the stars, newcomers who had only recently learned to travel beyond their own world. They were not known for advanced science, not compared to ancient empires that had studied medicine for thousands of years. Why turn to them when so many other species had already failed to help? Some advisors laughed at the idea. "Humans? They are barely out of their caves," one of them sneered. "What could they know that we do not?" Others shook their heads in anger. "It was humans who might have caused this," one said. "She met with their leaders, shared breath in the same air, and now she suffers. And you want to invite them here?" But not all dismissed the thought. A few remembered how humans, though young in the galaxy, had shown surprising adaptability. They had survived environments where other species would not last a day. They had simple ways of healing wounds, ways that sometimes worked when advanced machines failed. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was something in their knowledge worth trying. The debate went on for hours. Pride battled with desperation. On one side were those who refused to believe humans could hold answers the Empire could not find. On the other side were those who argued that saving the Queen was worth trying anything, no matter how unlikely. HerHFY. Last, the Council agreed to consider the idea. They sent quiet messengers to the nearby human colony, carrying only a few details of the Queen's illness. The humans were surprised but also cautious. Many were afraid. Who among them would dare risk the wrath of an empire if they failed? Who would put themselves in the middle of alien politics? For now, no human had yet been chosen. The Empire waited in silence, unsure of what would come next. But the thought had been planted. A new possibility now hung in the air, an idea both unthinkable and strangely hopeful. The Queen herself, though weak, heard whispers of this plan. And though she could barely speak, a faint smile touched her lips. She had always believed humans were not to be feared but to be understood. Perhaps, deep down, she already knew, the answer to her suffering might come from the most unexpected place of all. The message from the alien empire reached the human colony faster than anyone expected. It was not common for such powerful beings to ask humans for help. In fact, many humans thought it was impossible. The Empire had always looked at Earth and its colonies as small and inexperienced, still learning the basics of space travel. Yet the message was clear. Their Queen was ill, and no one among her people could cure her. They were looking for someone, anyone, who could try. At first, the humans were unsure how to respond. Leaders of the colony gathered in their meeting hall, voices rising with nervousness. Some argued that they should not get involved. "If we fail," one of them said, "they will blame us. Their empire is too strong. A single mistake could bring their anger upon all humans." Others felt the same fear. The Queen was not just any ruler. She was the heart of an empire that stretched across dozens of worlds. If her people thought humans had caused her harm, war could break out. But not everyone in the hall agreed. A smaller group argued that this was an opportunity. "If we succeed," another leader said, "we could prove ourselves in the eyes of the galaxy. Humans are seen as weak, but if one of us heals their Queen, it will change everything." The debate went on for hours until at last they made a decision. They would allow volunteers to step forward, but no one would be forced. Whoever had the courage and the skill could try. When the call for volunteers went out, most of the colony stayed silent. Few wanted to risk their lives in such a dangerous task. But among the crowd stood a man named Elias. He was not a soldier or a politician. He was a healer, trained in both modern science and old natural remedies passed down through generations. He had studied human biology deeply, and unlike many, he also had a strong curiosity about alien life. While others saw danger, he saw a chance to learn and a chance to help someone in need. Elias stepped forward. "I will go," he said simply. His voice carried across the hall. People turned to look at him in surprise. Some whispered that he was brave, others said he was foolish, but Elias stood firm. He explained that illness was not always about advanced machines or rare cures. Sometimes the smallest details made the biggest difference. He believed that if no alien had been able to find the cause, perhaps a fresh set of eyes could notice something they had missed. The human leaders hesitated. They questioned him, asking if he was ready for the risk. He nodded without fear. "If no one tries," Elias said, "then she will die. And if she dies, her empire may turn against us anyway. I would rather face the unknown with courage than wait for disaster." His words convinced them. By the end of the night, it was decided. Elias would be sent to the Queen's palace. When the alien envoys arrived to escort him, they looked doubtful. Tall, armored, and carrying the weight of their queen's suffering, they examined Elias carefully. To them, he seemed fragile, just another human with limited knowledge. One of them even asked, "Are you truly the best your people can offer?" Elias did not take offense. He only replied, "I am not the best of all humanity, but I will give everything I have." Something in his calmness silenced their doubts, and they agreed to bring him. The journey to the Queen's world was overwhelming. The alien ship was larger than any human vessel Elias had ever seen. Its halls glowed with strange light, and its windows showed endless stars rushing past. The crew barely spoke to him, their faces heavy with worry. Yet Elias did not feel fear. He spent the journey studying notes, reviewing everything he knew about sickness, food, environment, and hidden causes of illness. He knew he would have only one chance. When they arrived at the palace, the atmosphere was heavy. Guards stood in silence, their eyes sharp, their weapons ready. Advisors whispered nervously as Elias was brought through the halls. He could feel their doubt pressing down on him. To them, he was just a desperate gamble, a last attempt when all else had failed. If he succeeded, he would be honored. If he failed, he might never leave alive. Finally, he was brought to her chambers. The queen lay on a high bed, her body wrapped in layers of protective fabric, her skin pale with weakness. Even in her frailty, her presence filled the room. Elias bowed his head out of respect. When she turned her eyes toward him, he felt the weight of centuries of leadership in her gaze. She could barely speak, but she whispered a single word. "Human?" He nodded. "Yes, my queen. I am here to help, if you will let me." The alien physicians stood nearby, watching him carefully. They had already tried everything, and their pride made them skeptical. One of them muttered, "What could he possibly see that we have not?" But the queen raised her hand slightly, signaling for silence. She had allowed him to come, and she wanted to see what he could do. Elias began his work not with machines, but with observation. He looked closely at her eyes, her skin, the way she breathed. He asked quiet questions about her meals, her surroundings, her routines. The advisors frowned, thinking his methods too simple. But Elias did not rush. He believed every answer mattered. He noticed small things, the faint discoloration on her lips, the dryness in her throat, the unusual scent in the air of her chamber. To him, these were clues, signs that pointed to something overlooked. While the others relied on technology, Elias relied on patience. He wrote notes carefully, compared them to what he knew of human conditions, and thought deeply. Already, an idea was forming in his mind, though he was not yet ready to speak it. For now, he only continued his careful study. The aliens exchanged doubtful glances, but the queen herself watched him with quiet hope. For the first time in many days, the chamber felt different. There was still worry, but also a spark of something new. A human had come where no one else could succeed, and though many doubted, a faint possibility had begun to grow. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human might see what no alien had seen before. Elias spent the first night in the palace, studying everything around the queen. While alien physicians looked to their glowing instruments, Elias trusted his eyes, ears, and instincts. He asked to see the food she had eaten in the past days. The servants hesitated, but finally brought trays of shimmering fruits and glowing liquids, all delicacies from distant worlds. Elias examined each one carefully. He picked up a small crystal-like fruit, sniffed it, then placed it back. He tasted none of it, but he made careful notes in his book. The advisors whispered among themselves. To them it looked ridiculous. How could a human with a simple notebook hope to solve what their most advanced machines could not? Some of them laughed quietly, though they tried to hide it. But Elias ignored them. He had learned long ago that answers were often hidden in the smallest details. Hours passed as he questioned the queen's servants. "Has her food changed recently?" he asked. "Has anything in her chambers been replaced? Has she traveled anywhere unusual?" Many of the answers seemed unimportant at first, yet one detail caught his attention. The queen had recently begun drinking water imported from a distant moon. It was considered rare and precious, said to give strength. But Elias thought differently. "Even the purest water can carry harm if it comes from the wrong place," he whispered to himself. The alien physician scoffed. "It is impossible. That water is tested by our highest standards. It is safe." But Elias was not convinced. He asked for a sample and examined it closely under a basic light. To everyone's surprise, he noticed tiny grains at the bottom of the cup, barely visible but present. "What is this?" he asked. The alien shrugged. "It is part of the mineral content. Harmless." Elias frowned. To him, it was not harmless at all. Through his studies, Elias knew that even a small imbalance of minerals could poison the body slowly. On Earth, he had seen people suffer from contaminated wells, not because of germs, but because of hidden elements in the water. He began to suspect that the queen's illness was not a disease, but poisoning from this water. Her body, different from humans, might not be able to filter it. When Elias shared this idea, the room filled with argument. Some advisors shouted that he was insulting their sacred resources. Others warned that if he was wrong, the queen would grow worse. But Elias stood firm. "If we continue as we are, she will not survive. If I am right, removing this water from her diet could save her." At first, no one agreed, but the queen herself, weak though she was, lifted her hand. Her voice was faint, but her words were clear. "Let him try." The room fell silent. Her command could not be refused. From that moment, Elias began his treatment. He asked for clean, simple water from the palace reserves. He prepared it carefully, making sure nothing else touched it. At first, the queen's advisors resisted giving it to her, but when the queen insisted, they obeyed. She drank slowly, her lips trembling, yet her eyes closed in relief. For the next days, Elias stayed by her side. He changed her meals, asking for plainer foods without the exotic spices and glowing fruits. Instead, he gave her simple nourishment, small portions that her weakened body could handle. He also asked for certain herbs, some from human colonies. Others he found growing in the palace gardens. The alien physicians mocked his mixtures, calling them primitive. But Elias did not argue. He only focused on the queen. The healing process was not instant. At first she remained weak, and some doubted even more. But by the third day, her breathing grew easier. By the fourth, color began returning to her face. On the fifth, she opened her eyes. The day finally came when the queen could walk into her council chamber once more. The last time she had stood there, she had collapsed in front of her people. Now she walked slowly but with steady steps, her robes flowing behind her, her crown resting lightly on her head. The chamber fell silent the moment she entered. Advisors, generals, and nobles bowed deeply, many with tears in their eyes. Their queen had returned. At her side walked Elias, the human healer. He kept his head lowered, uncomfortable with the attention. He was not there for praise, but the court could not ignore him. Whispers ran through the chamber. That is the human, the one who healed her. Some spoke with awe, others with disbelief, but all eyes followed him. The queen raised her hand for silence. Her voice, though not yet as strong as before, carried firmly across the hall. You doubted I would rise again, she said. You feared I was lost, but today I stand before you, not because of your machines, not because of your rituals. I live because one among us dared to see differently. A human. The chamber stirred. Many lowered their heads, ashamed of their doubts. The queen continued. We thought ourselves masters of knowledge, yet in our pride we overlooked what was simple. This human Elias gave me not only his skill but his care, and in doing so he has given life back to your queen. She turned to Elias, her eyes shining. You have my gratitude, and with it, the gratitude of my people. From this day forward you are welcome in my empire, not as an outsider but as a friend. The court erupted in applause. Some clapped reluctantly, others with genuine joy. The guards struck their spears to the ground in honor. Outside, when the news spread, the people cheered across the capital. Bells rang, lights shone, and celebrations broke out. Their queen had been saved, and the one who saved her was a human. The days that followed, the bond between humans and the empire began to change. Where once there had been suspicion, there was now respect. Ambassadors from both sides spoke with new trust. Trade agreements were discussed, scientific exchanges planned. The story of Elias spread beyond the palace, carried to distant worlds. Everywhere, people repeated the tale. No alien physician could heal her, but a human could. For Elias, life remained simple. Though honored, he did not seek power or wealth. He returned to studying, helping others, and learning more about the universe. Yet wherever he went, people bowed or greeted him warmly. He had become a symbol, not of human superiority, but of human compassion. The queen herself often invited him back to the palace. They would walk through the gardens, speaking of their worlds. She asked about Earth's oceans, forests, and mountains. He asked about the stars she ruled, though from different species they shared a mutual respect. In time, she considered him not only her healer but her trusted friend. Years later, when people spoke of the great alliance between humans and the Empire, they always remembered the beginning. They remembered the illness that no alien science could solve. They remembered the doubt, the fear, and the whispers. And most of all, they remembered how one human stood up when no one else would, and by doing so changed the course of history. The Queen's voice echoed in every retelling. Sometimes, the smallest light can guide us through the darkest night. And sometimes that light comes from where we least expect it. And so it was written across the stars, the story of an alien queen who fell to a mysterious illness, and the human who healed her.